episodes out of it, but
we'll see. Hey, everybody, how's it going? We are live, and thank you to anybody who
was that the first thing that just
yeah, it's okay. This is a high quality production.
That's right.
So yeah, we're live here, and this is the first time I think we've done one of these live. And Dixon, I hadn't seen Superman 3 and Superman 4 in so long, and to anybody who's watching this, I was more of I was a huge Marvel Comics person growing up, and I didn't hate DC. I wasn't that sort of, I just tended to gravitate more towards Marvel. I remember watching Superman before I got into the comics.
Well, can I ask you a question there, which is, when were you what ages were you reading comics?
It would have been, I started at 12 to about 17. So in my early teenage years, I was big.
And before that, did you just pick them up because they seemed interesting, or did you have some reason that you were picking them up?
I'm going to go with I wasn't a very intelligent child who was well read and they had pictures. That's what I'm going to go with.
Well, I ask because I think I was reading comics around the same age range. Now, of course, I'm like a year younger than you. So, you'd have to. So if you were 12 in 89, I was 12 in 90. Because you were born in 77, right?
Yeah, 77.
And certainly the major impetus was the Batman film that came out in 1989. And I got very interested in Batman. And then around the same time, a comic book. I don't know if you remember. Where did you buy your comic books?
I ordered, so I got subscriptions. I went comic book subscription. So I went with, for whatever reason, I got for Christmas, and this was like a gift I got every year. I would get a monthly subscription to X-Men, to Spider-Man, Wolverine. I liked Gambit for some reason, which was a newer one. I had Fantastic Four, and there was one other, I think The Thing randomly. But they were all Marvel. I'm trying to remember what they were. They were all Marvel, and on my wall I had a shit ton of comics, but I was never that into DC, like the Avengers, anything like that. And when I was younger, Superman would have been my first exposure. And the Superman series, watching 3 and 4,
they're amazing.
I was so far removed. I was so far removed from Superman 3 and 4. I know I've seen those films, but my brain just said no. It's almost like trauma. When you go through something traumatic, you put something out of your head, and it's just your brain's like
no, turn it off. Listen, when I was a kid, I remember, we had Superman 3, and my parents were early adopters of VCRs. In fact, we had a beta machine. That's how early of an adopter we were, and so whenever we would copy a movie, like if we rented it from the video store, FBI, I hope you're not listening. We would.
You dirty bastard. So you copied every.
we taped. Although I have to say, some of the movies, at least at the beginning, especially, like I know that our copy of Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, which I think is equally frowned upon, but they were taped from a Prism, because my cousins had Prism. And they, like, my aunt would tape these things and give us copies, for us. So I think probably Superman and Superman 2 were Prism dubbed. Prism, for those who are listening to this and who do not know what Prism is, it was a Philadelphia regional. In fact, it stood for the Philadelphia Regional In-Home Sports and Movies. It was a premium cable channel in the area.
It was good.
And it was. It was
very good.
I never had. Believe me, that was one of those things as a kid that it was like the dying dream that we would get Prism. And I remember when Prism finally stopped being a thing, which was good from the sports fan perspective that I had, because it was this premium channel. It was like $15 a month, and the home games for the Phillies, Flyers, and Sixers were generally broadcast on Prism. And in 1980. $5, $6, $7, $8, $15 a month was, you're paying that now for HBO, but it's 2021. Anyway, so those movies, but like we would dub these things. And I remember the reason I brought this up is because I remember Superman 4 we didn't have at first, and I think I basically bogarted it from my cousins, the same people
Yeah.
who were from the Gallaghers. I think I said, "Can I borrow that one day?" And it was on the beta tape, and I never returned it. It had some other movie on it too. I'm trying to remember what it was, and I brought it home, and that's how I had Superman 4. So then, of course, as I got older, Superman and Superman 2 I would watch from time to time. Although the only one I ever bought on DVD for the longest time, like when DVDs were first a thing, I ran out and purchased Superman. And I remember being very annoyed. I'm sure I still have, or maybe I finally gave it away. But the Superman DVD, when they released that film on DVD, they did the quote unquote director's cut where they added a whole bunch of deleted scenes. And I say I was annoyed because at first I was very excited to see all these scenes I'd read about but never seen. But then, what I found, like a lot of DVDs did this, they came out with director's cuts on DVD, and that was a way of selling extra DVDs or whatever. But in many cases, they never released the original theatrical cut on DVD. They only released the director's cut. And of course, the director's cut was not what you remembered watching as a kid. And most of the time, I will say that the best director's cut, I won't say it's the only good one. I'd have to, watch them all. And I could think of a couple off the top of my head that I think do add some things that improve the film. The Exorcist being one of them. But, the thing about most director's cuts, in my mind, is that, and the one that's the paramount example of really good is Blade Runner. Because when you watch the Blade Runner of director's cut, rather than add things to the movie, for the most part, it subtracts stuff. That the film is a little bit leaner, and most especially, famously, if you're familiar with that film, there's a voiceover that the studio made them put in when the film was done because they found the film hard to follow without someone sort of with basically Harrison Ford's character over overdubbing a voiceover to explain certain plot elements. So the director's cut removes that, and the movie therefore, it's a 2-hour movie that probably has half an hour of dialogue. It's a really image driven film, and it's a really wonderful film without that commentary or without that voiceover. But generally, like Superman, it's good. You should check it out sometime. But Superman, when they released the director's cut, it added all the sorts of things that were fun to see the first time, but after a while, it was like the movie's already kind of long, and now it's dragging. And these are scenes that they were cut out for a reason. They were cut out because someone decided that it was interrupting the pacing of the film, and to me, I felt that. Anyway, so
by the way, we have Integrity. I don't know if you noticed in the comments, Dixon, because we haven't had comments before, and this is the first time you've done a show where we've had comments. And Integrity 101 is one of the guys who was commenting, on Donner versus Lester. He or she, I think it's he, has been educating me on the nuance of the Donner cut, which I have learned something on it. And I'll be honest, I still prefer.
What, you didn't learn it from me? I'm hurt.
No. I think Integrity is a little bit more intelligent. That's all. It's no offense intended. No, but he said, "Cool, I'm a PA guy too."
He's watching Lindros, hockey guy. sorry, Integrity.
Well, no, because that was the first sport. Not to jump off Superman, ice hockey was the first sport I remember when the Flyers were on that Stanley Cup run. And I remember that was I think that was post Prism, to be fair. I think that was
Prism unraveled around 93.
I think Lindros came out and right towards the end of Prism, but it's good that we have people watching us that can identify with half of the shit that we're talking about. Yeah. So if we say Wawa Integrity, you know what we're talking about.
Exactamundo.
Going back to Superman, I think looking at Superman 3, I don't know what the fans think of Superman 3 as somebody who's coming back and sort of revisiting my childhood, revisiting these films I
say I wish I could have been there with you watching Superman.
It was how can I describe it? Because it was 1 and 2, and even the Donner cut. I was critical of things in the Donner cut. I still thought, okay, it's a Superman film. It's serviceable. It does the job. It's not that dissimilar from the Lester cut to me. I know that's controversial. Fuck it, I'm going to say it. Mm-hmm. However, Superman 3 was really hard work. It was really hard work to get
really
through. And I found not from just it was frustrating me because
it's a frustrating film. That is a very good word for it.
We're going to talk about 4 as well, but if I were to take a look at the number of notes that I took for 3 versus 4. And this is not a commentary on how good one is versus the other. but I had 5 comments for 4. I had 20 comments for 3. And there was just, whenever I see something, I'm like, oh, that bothers me, I would write it down. And there was so many instances where I'm just like, this doesn't even connect. And the one thing I wanted to highlight, and I think I might have mentioned it to you, Integrity, in the chat, the Superman 3 really paints a picture as to why people are so anti-Lester in the Superman 2 franchise.
That is very true. I mean, from the opening of Superman, and by the way, I will say this about Superman 3. I think I had a somewhat similar experience to you, except that wind the clock back about 15 years ago now. Jeez. But I mean, I went probably, I vaguely as a kid, I remember feeling that Superman, Superman 2, and Superman 4 were good. And that Superman 3 was sort of this oddball film that didn't quite fit.
Yeah.
And as a result, like, you know how when you watch things as a kid, you watch them into the ground, you watch them over and over. And then, you know, you kind of like you go through a phase and you stop watching them for a while. And so that's why I was bringing up that Superman. The only one I actually bought on DVD when I first started being able to buy DVDs was the original Superman film. I didn't bother with even 2.
Yeah.
I didn't get them on DVD until Superman Returns came out, and they released this beautiful box set, which I have, which included the Superman 2 Richard Donner cut and all that. But somewhere in between when I bought Superman on DVD, which would have been in 2000 or 2001, and when that box set came out, 2006, Hollywood Video, if you remember Hollywood Video in Warminster, and it was generally, it was a Blockbuster's competitor. Anyway, they were liquidating their VHS tapes as the DVD thing was taking over, and I went and they were selling them for like $1. So I bought a copy of Superman 3 because I was like, hey, I haven't watched Superman 3 in forever. And my girlfriend at the time, wife now, I said, hey, let's sit down, let's watch this, it'll be fun. And I remember popping it into the, and telling her, like, this is a bad movie. I know it's a bad movie. I remember certainly as a kid, the ending sequence where that woman, the sister, gets trapped in the computer and turned into like a robot monster, scared the bejesus out of me, which is it was always made me very uncomfortable, that whole sequence where she's transformed and then comes out. And so the reason why I never watched. So anyway, I watched it with Anna saying, like, this is terrible, terrible, terrible. And then I remember, like, for the first 45 minutes, I was like, well, this isn't so bad. Like, it's hanging together. It's fun. It's pretty good. And then it starts to unravel. But
there's a few things. And when we have Integrity's come in, and Integrity's actually done a fucking good job of highlighting, I think, what I'm trying to quantify that I haven't yet. But there's 2. First, Superman 3 is a result of Donner being fired. Reeve almost didn't do the film. This is 100% Lester with the benefit of the Donner cast.
Yes.
And I do want to add to that because I did find something on Wikipedia that I think really sort of links into that with Superman 3. And so in that it says the film screenplay by David and Leslie Newman was also criticized. When Richard Donner was hired to direct the first 2 films, he found the Newman script so distasteful that he hired Tom Mankiewicz for heavy rewrites. Since Donner and Mankiewicz were no longer attached, the Salkinds were free to bring their version of Superman to the screen and once again hired the Newmans for writing duties. And Reeves even commented that it was a bit too shticky before the rewrites originally. But then he says, Integrity, which I think this is how I would quantify it. This is maybe what I've been trying to reach for. Superman 3 had the budget but no heart. Superman 4 had the heart but no budget.
I couldn't agree with more.
I think that is
that is hammer squarely on the head. I was going to say something very similar, and that was actually more succinct probably than I would have put it.
So the point, and I want to show you, I've actually queued up the point that I was just like, I had to walk away. Like my wife was like, this, like my wife left the room. She's like, I'm going to go do some chores. She's like, this is silly. And this was the point. And it was right around this scene. I'm going to share this scene here that I've queued it up. So I don't know if this was the point you. I
have a point in my head where I feel like the movie starts to fall apart, but let's see where you are.
So not where it falls apart, but where I'm out.
Okay.
So it's because I don't want to get it. We're not monetized or anything, but I don't want to.
I don't want to be led away in handcuffs by the FBI.
This right here.
Right off the beginning. Oh, wow, you didn't get 20 minutes into it. 25.
And I think there's things we can classify. Pink cape scene for Integrity was the point.
That's the one. That is the one. Yes, where Richard Pryor skis off the top of the building. That is where I feel like the movie no longer works. You know.
I think for me, when I can live with so there's things I will afford 80s films or Superman films. And I think Superman 4, the reason I have so few comments, a lot of the special effects or a lot of the weird shit that goes on in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's about how cheaply it was made. It's not necessarily about the idea. But go on.
Where I give them sort of some grace. So for instance, and this was in 3, where he freezes the lake to be able to pour water over the fire.
See, I think that's pretty good.
I suspend the physics thing where all of the weight of the lake being held by 2 man-sized hands. But that's the thing. You suspend that. You suspend that. So I'm not saying that's something, but where we get into this scene where because I had to rewind it to watch it again because I'm trying to understand why the weather satellite is fucking with ATM machines and traffic lights. And for me, it was just like it just added a layer of confusion, and it was almost like, how are we going to force more slapstick into this film? And building up to this whole film reminded me an episode of The Twilight Zone where everybody was a dickhead or an idiot in this town, because you have that opening scene where the guy with the dog loses the dog and then starts walking the line painting machine, and people are falling all over each other, and there's fire starting. And
I've never seen the 80s Twilight films.
No, but it's just the beginning of this Superman film was like a Twilight Zone film.
I see what you're saying. I thought you were
where you were transported into this world where everybody was like that clumsy character from Police Academy falling over each other, and everything was dangerous.
Well,
I'm just like, what's going on here? It's like, how much?
I mean, the tone is incredibly different, and Richard Lester establishes that at the beginning. And actually, now that you mentioned, I forgot that traffic light don't cross fighting thing happens not in the opening sort of comedic ballet, but actually after the weather satellite piece. I confess I did not rewatch Superman 3 for this, only because I watched it fairly recently with my son. And because that movie, as objectionable as it is on one level, first of all, as a kid, the part that I certainly really liked, and the closest thing that any of the movies that the Salkinds did got to, and as somebody who liked Superman, was the Bizarro character. I always liked Bizarro. I don't know if you ever watched the Super Friends cartoon when you were a kid.
Yes.
He was part of the Legion of Doom.
Yes.
I was always fascinated. I was always fascinated by sort of the alternate evil Superman concept. And of course, Superman 3 has that. And so for that reason, I've always appreciated the film, at least on that level. And also because the film is so light in tone through much of it, it's not a bad children's. I mean, I could show it to my son and not feel like, and I figured he'd like the evil Superman versus good Superman motif the same as I did. And he seemed to enjoy it. So I've watched it fairly recently, but I started to say at the outset of this, and let me, finish this thought, is because I had that 12 years or gap or whatever. It was longer than that. Probably I hadn't watched it since the late 80s. And then in 2004 or 5, I watched it. And I was like, the movie falls apart. And I agree with our commenter about the sequence where it does. The one thing I want to say, I think that the movie participates in a subgenre that is very noticeable in the early to mid 80s that has totally disappeared, which is the movie about a computer thing happening.
Yeah.
And I guess you could take the 2001 A Space Odyssey as the first version of that.
Yeah.
And there's some 70s ones. There's a movie called Demon Seed about a computerized house that's very Ray Bradbury-esque that takes over takes over, like the centralized computer takes over the house and traps the woman. And in fact, that stars Robert Vaughn, the star of Superman 3. But if I start looking at the 80s, I mean, it intensifies, right? Like Jumping Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg, War Games with Matthew Broderick, Weird Science, arguably, which the two kids, it's a comedy. I mean, it's very much of its period, like it's squarely put in the period. And so for that reason, and also for the fact that, Superman as a comic and general comic books, I mean, you have to remember Richard Lester's a Brit. They didn't have comic books in Britain. It wasn't the thing. And he looks at it as sort of silly. And even some issues of the comic book, were certainly tongue in cheek. So like, I don't mind, for example, that opening sequence that you're talking about. Like, I remember thinking that was actually pretty well executed for what it was. The thing that bothered me most about it was that it was obviously shot in Vancouver as opposed to New York City. So Metropolis. But I guess you could argue, like, in fact, in a more serious way, what's his name? Christopher Nolan did this with the later Batman films, trying to create a Gotham City. You know, unlike the beautiful job, and I have to say, there's a lot of problems. We could talk about the Batman 1989 film. That's a movie that's endlessly frustrating to me because it's got both very good and very questionable elements to it.
We will get to that at some point.
We will. But one of the things that's unquestionably wonderful about that is its production design and the nightmare city that Anton Furst devised for that film and the way it looks. It's gorgeous. But the way Christopher Nolan handled trying to do that, rather than, because that was all built on a studio and with models, because Tim Burton is so into models. Yeah. So it's all very fabricated. The way Christopher Nolan handled it was to change the location of what Gotham City was from film to film. So in the first film, I believe the third film, it's Pittsburgh. The second film, it's Chicago. I forget where the first film they used, and then of course by that point they could digitally add things to alter the look even further. But you know, what Superman 3 did in changing locations, I mean, they did it for budgetary reasons, but you know, you could make an argument that Lester's expansion of the imagination a little bit away from, I mean, Donner was so reverential and towards the material, and I like that, but you know, when you look at Superman 4, Richard Donner played that out in 1 and 2. I don't know that there was much where else to go with it. Part of the problem with Superman 4 is that they start checking boxes. They're like, well, Lois Lane has to be, you know, have a sequence where she finds out Clark Kent is Superman, and Superman is Clark Kent, and we have to have that sort of romantic scene. So we do it sort of randomly thrown in the middle for no apparent reason, right? Yeah. You know, anyway, so that's...
we have Integrity saying, listen, Lester, sorry, just didn't care. It's all
that's
a joke.
True.
Donner added a comedy with one character. Otis Lester is nonstop silliness and eye rolls. What I would say, and this is maybe where I disagree a little bit, is I feel like if we look at Superman 3 and Superman 2, the body of work, let's say Lester's body of work, they're not even the same film to me. If I were to look at the slapstick in Superman 2 that Lester did, it's a little bit more understated. And some of the elements in the film, the reason I like the Lester version is, and this goes back to the, you know, what Integrity, what you saw, what we discussed. I think some of the scenes and how they were put together were more sensible to me, and they were less problematic. Not all of them, and yeah, of course, I agree about the big Superman-esque. But in this film, it was just one big sort of like it was distracting, and I think the film was 2 hours long. You could have cut most of that shit out, and it would have been a substantially better film. I think that's one of the biggest detractors. One other comment, Evil Superman is the best part of Superman 3. And I think we should, because I do have some positives from it. And guess where they stole that idea from? Tom Mankiewicz, Donner's writer from Superman 1 and Superman 2. So literally the best part of 3 is still coming from Donner's team.
Unsurprising.
I would agree with that. That was one of the parts that, you know, the film brought me back in. That felt like
it came actually out of the comic book universe. The rest of it's a Richard Pryor film.
And even like, I was initially, Richard Pryor was, I thought, actually a strong part of the film that was
it's not bad for Richard. I mean, I've seen some really bad Richard Pryor movies. If I'm isolating it as a Richard Pryor film, it's like fair to middling. It's like, it's not as good as like Hear No Evil, See No Evil with Gene Wilder. It's not as bad as you know, I like Brewster's Millions, so Brewster's Millions is on the plus side, but on the negative
that's a borderline
side,
one. Yeah.
Like
I did have like one of my favorite scenes in the film was with I've forgotten his name. Robert Vaughn.
Yeah, Robert Vaughn.
Yeah, where Robert Vaughn, like they find out that there's millions gone, which I think Office Space got the idea from.
Oh yeah, they absolutely they say that outright in the movie.
Yeah, which is brilliant. I forgot about it, and I'm like, yes, that's right. But the in Superman 3, the scene where they realize that they're losing a shit ton of money. And they said, oh, the guy's never going to show himself. You know, he's like, who's that stupid to do that? And he looks out the window and he sees Richard Pryor pulling up in a brand new Ferrari. That I thought was one of the best scenes in the film. I thought they did a really good job of introducing Richard Pryor to Robert Vaughn. I thought that was quite good.
Oh, I thought you were going to go, because my favorite line in the film is probably when Robert Vaughn says to Richard Pryor, annoyed that the kryptonite has not killed the fabricated kryptonite. And he says, "I asked you to, all I wanted was for you to kill Superman. I asked you for that one simple thing."
No, to be fair, that was good. I mean, and what I can live with. I mean, forget the pink cape thing. That was absolutely awful. I can live with.
I mean, again, it would be okay in a Richard Pryor movie.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing about it. It's just, it's just too much in the direction of, like, if you wanted to do a parody of Superman starring Richard Pryor, or, an intentionally comedic sketch on Saturday Night Live where Richard Pryor, in isolation, if you separate it from the rest of it, it's even sort of okay, reasonably amusing. It's just that it has no belonging in it. Doesn't. There's a reason why what's his name, which is another movie we should really talk about sometime. Superman Returns. Bryan Singer, who directed that. Superman Returns tells you at the opening. I don't think it names the films, but they certainly said in the run up to its release. And it was an odd choice in some ways, but one thing that they were very clear about was that Superman Returns was a sequel to Superman 2. And they were basically pretending like Superman 3 and 4 had not happened.
Just another comment, because this is probably more on what I was saying. Remember, when Lester gets hired for Superman 2, he walks on with 90 minutes of Superman 2 already completed. It's 75% done.
That's right. Yeah.
I would just say that the scenes that Lester changed out, to me, were better. And this is my preference. You're going to go nuts over this integrity, and I'm sorry, but for me, the one scene that I really struggled with, and we spoke about this, was
your integrity 101 integrity, and Mr. Sean here is non-integrity, disintegrity. What's the word I'm looking for?
I am just shit. So I think I bring a different level of value because I'm not necessarily. Superman is something that I loved as a child, and I'm kind of coming back and revisiting it. So I do have affection for the franchise.
Grandfather of all comic book figures, and the best, to my mind, for that reason, still the best of all comic book heroes.
But I think I bring sort of an external viewpoint because I do think sometimes the Superman fans are going to get a bit sort of like, I think to a degree, I think sometimes, and I'm not saying this is about you, Integrity, I think sometimes from what I've seen the reviews, people are too accepting of some of the things in the Donner film that are just egregious in my view. And like the big example, and this is what I mentioned in my comment, the Lois Lane jumping out of the window versus the Lois Lane jumping into the Niagara River. To me, that is the way those scenes unfolded. There's a gulf in that, and we debated this, Andrew, before the scene where the way they unfurled that Zod rolling into town, the way the Lester film brought that about, to me, was just a much more sensible way of moving that plot forward. Now, it didn't change the plot. It's just the way he unfolded that was so much more sensible.
But that whole piece of the plot, of Superman 2, that Zod shows up in that little, podunk town in Texas, Idaho, East Houston, Idaho, which is odd because that would be West Houston, but Northwest Houston. But that whole sequence was Lester written, conceived, and executed. So it's no wonder that it works better. They had to be included in the Donner version because if you didn't include it, they didn't have any other material.
Yeah.
Like they needed to kind of like jack it in there somehow.
Yeah.
To make the movie hang together at all.
Because I the way I would describe it as sort of an outsider looking in, I thought that Donner was better for the Superman franchise, but I thought Lester as a filmmaker, forgetting the style and the shtick, Lester was a better filmmaker as far as the cinematography. That was my sort of amateur view on it. That doesn't mean that I think, watching 3 now, Lester is a fucking joke for the franchise. And I think I would have loved now to have seen. I went from preferring the Lester, which I still do, Superman 2. I would have loved to have seen Donner go through that process of 1, 2, and 3 without budget constraints and with full support of the studio.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, I will say that, I have a very good friend who you may have met at some point in your travels, whose name is Matt Preget.
Yeah, no, he was one of I remember Matt because I remember I liked things that were fairly commercial, and he was very much, and Matt, if you ever watch this, this is not a knock on you in any way. I just remember he was he was like the avant-garde film guy, and he
Well,
didn't
and he
like
still
anything
is.
mainstream. And I remember I was just saying, yeah, I just like something in general, and it was just very much like, ooh, that's terrible. And I forget why, but I just remember thinking, so when I hang out with Andrew and his friends, I can't like anything that's commercial in any way. So I'm just going to keep that to myself, or we're going to get in a debate that I can't hang in. That was me at the time. I was just like, I remember him saying, somebody bringing up a film, and I'm thinking, oh, I like that. And he's just like, oh, that's terrible. I was like,
Stand your ground, Sean. Stand your ground.
Well, now I would. But at the time, I was just like, no. I'm new to this group. I'm not That was the thing. I was never like, never able to hang with, with Matt and his film sort of chops at the time. I was just, I like it. That was sort of my,
Well, Matt has made a study, and he's now gone to NYU for graduate school and all that. But and he is still an active and employed film reviewer. He worked for the Metro for a while, and now I'm trying to remember who he writes. We should. He's working on a podcast anyway, so we should. He would enjoy this conversation because he would be very much defending Richard Lester. He really had it out for Richard Donner. And listen, like, I understand, from one perspective, it really boils down to how invested are you in Superman. If you like Superman and think that the character himself is worth treating seriously, you're going to like Richard Donner. If you are questioning if Superman is sort of like, pat nonsense to you, like, sure, yeah, okay, maybe historically interesting as the originator of the superhero genre, but other than that, I mean, listen, there's a reason why they've been able to make a number of successful Batman films, but really, other than Richard Donner's Superman 2 did very well, and is a pretty good film, even a theatrically released one. But other than that, like, Man of Steel is terrible in my opinion, and some of the other later Superman.
I haven't watched many of the new Supermans. They're always on a plane, and I always fall asleep. Which I don't know if that's a commentary on how good or bad those films are.
Well, I mean, where I'm going with this is that Superman as a character presents a number of dramatological problems for a screenwriter, because you have somebody who's ultimately invulnerable. And so how do you present him with something that's threatening? I actually think that one thing that they worked out, and again, not a surprise, I think I may have mentioned this on one of our conversations in the past, is that the animated series that started with Batman, the animated series in 1992, and then the Warner Brothers kept producing, they then did a Superman series and a Justice League series. The Superman series in that run, I think, actually figured it out how to do it, and I'm sure it was coming to some degree from the comics, but they articulated it very well in that show, which was, you had Darkseid if you needed like somebody who could match Superman sort of physically blow for blow, but I never found Darkseid all that interesting. What they did was they took Lex Luthor, and rather than try to make him like sort of like a comedic wisecracking guy like he is in the Donner films, or at one point in the comic books, they gave him a kryptonite suit and tried to make him like, he could fly and maybe, in that suit and maybe match Superman on a physical level. What they decided eventually was to make Lex Luthor the head of like a corporation whose every action, exists in sort of the legal gray zone. And so it's not like, if a corporate action is taking place way over there and Superman stands for truth, justice, and the American way. Well, part of truth, justice, and the American way is due process and being able to prove things and not just go punching your way. If you see, like, I'm Superman, I show up at the scene of a fire. Sure, I blow it out. If I show up at the scene where someone's about to stab somebody, sure, I, punch him, I take the knife and I put him in jail. These are easy things to solve. Lex Luthor as the idea of the head of a corporation that's doing things that are of questionable, moral, whatever, but may exist in a legal gray zone where he can't just go and beat the hell out of the CEO of the corporation. That's how you solve the problem, is that Superman has got to become something of an investigator despite all of his, brawn.
And that's a good segue here, because we're at the point where I think we should transition into 4. And before we do, Integrity said the East Houston, Idaho stuff is 100% Lester. Yes, much of the writing is from Donner's script, though. They shot in the small town to save money, because Donner and Zod in DC, much scarier, more threatening. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, I think that may make sense as to why the the Lester version seemed a bit more formulaic, or correctly formulaic, as far as, you know, working a specific process, where the Donner bit seemed a bit bitty.
And to finish what I was saying earlier, I mean, like, the thing with Donner is, if you don't buy into Superman, if you see him as silly, then Donner's very reverential treatment of the character can grate. You know what I mean? Like that you're casting Superman as a Christ figure, which he undoubtedly, there is some element of that in the comic books. You could also argue he's a mosaic, I don't know if that's the right term, but you know, certainly because the two people who invented Superman were both Jewish, and Superman, as you know, I actually called into a radio show myself once, where they were discussing Superman. I was saying, you know, one of the things about Superman as an archetype is he's an immigrant story, because basically he looks like us, he talks like us, but he's not really from here. So it's a little bit like, and you know, he's written by two Jewish kids whose parents or grandparents, one or the other, were from, you know, the old country. And the guy who was, you know, on as the expert on this show said, yes, exactly. Superman is sometimes regarded as Superman, which would be the way you'd pronounce the name, right? As like that Jewish last name. And you know, so it has all that element. But if you were to throw all that, as a Superman's just silly and, you know, isn't that interesting as a character, then Richard Donner, you know, like, first of all, the first film takes quite a while to introduce Superman. I like it because I think it's all well done. But some people, I could see someone saying it drags. And if you think that the character is silly to begin with, the way he's treated by the film could grate. Whereas, you know, so Richard Donner is basically doing things in a very straight kind of very, you know, unquestioning of the material at its core sort of way. Whereas
according
Lester
to Superman Hoyle.
Right, exactly. Whereas as Richard Lester comes in, you know, with an outsider's perspective, as you say, with that perspective of someone not from this culture. And that's sort of an interesting match, because Superman himself is supposed to be not from this culture. As I'm sure you've seen Kill Bill, right?
Yeah.
Volumes 1 and 2. You know, I don't really care for those films particularly, but the sequence of dialogue that Quentin Tarantino writes for Bill at the end, where he talks about Superman, I always found kind of enlightening, because I myself had never thought of this before. But that David Carradine's character, Bill, in that says the difference between Superman and like, say, Batman and most of the other superheroes is that their superhero identity is the thing that they're putting on. Bruce Wayne is really Bruce Wayne. He pretends to be Batman. Peter Parker is really Spider-Man, or really Peter Parker. He pretends to be Spider-Man. Superman is really Superman. He pretends to be Clark Kent. And as a result, everything you're looking at is like somebody who is like, it's a reflection of who he thinks we are. And when you think about it that way, Richard Lester is sort of like, this is what he thinks comic books are. It's an interesting match, you know. So all that silliness and whatever you could.
I don't necessarily agree with everything you're saying, because I don't think Lester in 2 does that much of a disservice to the franchise, and I think in 2, I think you can like.
Well, as Integrity pointed out, I don't think he only had to shoot about. I think a lot of the film was already done. Yeah. So he was only going to have a certain degree of impact on what the final product was.
I'm going to link in what you said and what Integrity said in the chat that we had, because one of the questions I had, and one of the things I was quite vocal about, was my distaste for the reversing time. And you'll have to have a look at the comment, because Integrity has a really good contextual view on why that exists, and I don't want to do it a disservice. So have a look on the video in the comment. But one of the things I was trying to point out, my issue with the time travel piece, is it links into what you're talking about in relation to Superman being a problematic character to write for, because he's invincible. Now, to add in that sort of element that he can now reverse time, along with being largely unbeatable, you know, for me, I don't like that element, that is a tool in his toolkit, unless it's like in 3, where he had, or was it 4, where he could use, I'm getting him confused now, where he had this last chance to use the power of Krypton. You know, this you know, going in time thing or reversing time is not that. And if he has that in his toolbox, I find, you know, a lot of the Superman films a little bit more problematic now, because it's like, oh, well, why doesn't he just go back in time? You know, that's constantly in the back of my head.
Sure. And I think that everybody who has a critique of that film, and I'm guessing, I haven't seen the comment, but I'm guessing Integrity refers to the fact that Tom Mankiewicz talked about this. And the idea is that the Superman 1 and 2, I think the time turning thing was supposed to happen at the end of Superman 2, not 1.
This is what, and just to kind of jump into that. So, one, I just want to, I'll come back to this, but that's what Integrity was saying. He said it was because it was meant to be a 4-hour film. I guess the overarching piece, it was only meant to happen once. I'm not a fan of it even happening once. I appreciate why Integrity says it should happen once. But the only reason, so Integrity, what I'm saying is it's not a one-time thing, meaning, he only did it once, so it's not that bad. It wasn't listed as sort of like, this is his one bit of Superman juice to do this, and he can't do it ever again. This is something he can, when Lois dies again because she's dumb as fuck and always walks in front of cars because there's a story, he's just going to go ahead and bring her back to life in Superman 5. And just to have that in his toolkit as the Man of Steel, I don't like. It's just a personal preference.
And Sean, I will actually say I agree with you on this. Like listening to, I don't generally listen to the commentary tracks on DVDs, but because for Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, because the thing is such a idiosyncratic piece of work, I felt like this is something I want to listen to the commentary track on. And Tom Mankiewicz is all over that, he and Richard Donner. And I have to say, Mankiewicz has a higher estimation of himself and the story he wrote for Superman 1 and 2 than I think is warranted.
I gotta listen to that.
I mean, he really thinks that, like, he just did an amazing job, and that at the end of the time travel thing. And I understand what he was trying to build towards is that Superman, like, that there's this growing pains concept, that he's like sort of an adolescent going through like the adulthood process. And of course, the last step of that is your father forbids you to do something, and then you do it anyway, and not, and he does it twice, right? Because one time, of course, in the Richard Donner cut, he has to give his powers away, and his father says, don't do it. And he does it anyway. Then he gets his powers back. But then, no, don't interfere in human affairs, spin the world backwards. And he does that. And that's one's supposed to say, okay, he has separated. He doesn't need to run to daddy. He can assert himself as a man. But that's all well and good, but I agree that the actual plot point sort of wrecks the whole thing, because if you give Superman the ability, first of all, it doesn't make any goddamn sense, because if you turn the world backwards, not only are you going to undo, what was done, presumptively it's all going to start again right where it had started in the first place, and it's not going to, the whole thing sucks. You know what I mean? Like, it does. It's not good.
So here's a good question. So we're getting a bit of debate. I love it. So do you dislike time travel in Avengers and ZSJL? That's the
Zack Snyder. So I have not gotten through that 4-hour monstrosity yet.
Time travel is used a lot. So I want to get his point out, and then I'll let you comment, because I can't comment on this. I haven't watched, and I'm coming. This is something that I think is maybe a good one, Integrity, for us to review anyway. Time travel is used a lot, and I agree. Time travel in every film is silly, with the exception of Back to the Future, I think you meant to say. But I think it's cool. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's cool to see Flash or Superman do it once. But
you can do it and do it better than it was done. That's the thing.
I think if you make it like the way they did, he had his one chance to use his Krypton, power. And then that was done. He was totally separated from Krypton. I get that. He's got something in the bank. He has to choose a specific time to use it.
Yeah, you're right. That actually would have been a better execution of that plot.
And that's my thing. And I agree with the Flash, with Superman, because Flash actually was that's one of the DC comics I had. Flash, Batman, and Superman. That was sort of my DC universe there. And I loved the Flash. I really loved, actually, I don't know if you remember this, and Integrity, you would have been around our time as well. The Flash that was on ABC.
TV show, like the 1990, yeah. I have that on DVD. I've never popped it in yet.
I remember loving the shit out of that show. I really got into Flash then. I don't know. I think now I'd watch it. I think it was a joke, but that was an awesome show when I was growing up.
Right. Well, I have to take a look at it, and I can't really speak to Integrity's comment here because I have not finished Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I have
check it out.
Yes, and I saw not just the Zack Snyder Justice League. I've watched it a second time so that I could understand what the Zack Snyder Justice League was doing differently, but I haven't. It's a 4-hour film, so and I have a kid and everything. It's a lot to take on. The Avengers, I can't get into the Marvel. I liked Iron Man. I liked Iron Man 2, but like it's too much. It's too much. I have not been able to get into the Marvel stuff. I was never a Marvel kid anyway. I have a suggestion, though, before we move on to anything else, because we have now relitigated the Superman 2 and Superman question and the Richard Donner versus Richard Lester question. but I think we should spend at least a couple of minutes sort of capping off, like, what do we really think about Superman 3, other than Richard Lester sucks, at least in terms of as a choice for, if you're trying to deal with the material in any level of seriousness, Richard Lester was not the guy for Superman 3. But Superman 3, like, let's isolate it for a second. Let's forget Superman 1 and 2. That's what Bryan Singer did when he made Superman Returns. He said, let's just forget that happened. So let's treat it as a film in isolation. How do you think that the film works or doesn't work?
So for me, the thing I like about the film, and I do like things about the film, I love all the computer stuff. I love the compute, like the history of the time period that it's sort of frozen in, with the computer technology that it's inventing. It's, basing on this sci-fi world. I really like that. But as an element, it does not carry the film. Richard Pryor actually being positive does not carry the film. Christopher Reeve in it was actually quite good in this one. I'd even argue he was better in this one than the other ones as far as an actor is concerned. Maybe not in one, but he was very good in this. I think the film on its own just is not a good film to watch. Like, if you have your kid and you want to get a dose of Superman, watch Superman 3, fine. Yeah, but I think if I were to give it a score, should we hold off on scores until we well, no, I think we could do the score, but let me jump in here before we score. Please. Because I think you said something really interesting there, which is, like, you often talk about a film, like, and I can think of many movies where I feel like the sum is more than the sum is more than the parts. You know what I mean? Like, how do you say that expression? But, like, I'm tripping. The sum is greater than
it's greater than the sum of its parts. Yeah. So there you go. This is a movie where I think it's less than the sum of its parts, because I can, like, as Integrity pointed out, as I said earlier, certainly the evil Superman versus good Superman sequence is all pretty compelling, except where Richard Lester insists on having evil Superman do some really tawdry stuff. I mean, it's one thing to have, like, the idea that he's just going to hit on that lady at the top of the Statue of Liberty. I don't know. Like, that's like a little, like,
he was, I gotta think, like, she must have, for the sake of TV, for this, I mean, I don't know what sexual favor she offered him, but he was flying like a bat out of hell to get to that boat.
Yeah.
He was just like, listen, and she just looked at him, and he knew there may have been a BJ involved, a Superman BJ.
Well, I like Superman 3. I mean, like, that sequence, that evil Superman versus good Superman, that's a plot motif that's been ripped off time and again since that film. So you have to acknowledge that Superman 3, because I'm not aware of that. I mean, the idea that you're fighting an inner demon that's externalized in some way, but in the very specific way that it's done in Superman 3, I'm trying to think that there's at least one, whenever I watch it, I'm like, well, this is just like, they obviously are ripping off Superman 3 here when they do this. Anyway, it's an iconic little piece of the plot. The Richard Pryor sequences, like I said, they're not the worst Richard Pryor movies, so they're not bad. And I think that the first 45 minutes of the film really are pretty good. I think it was wise. You kind of played out the Lois and Clark thing in Metropolis to move the plot, the story to
Lana.
To Lana Turner and to Lana Lang, excuse me. Yeah. And it's a Smallville to move the actual setting was I thought also a good move. And you're right. I also agree that Christopher Reeve, one of the advantages I have by having that DVD set is I've actually watched the making of Superman 3 special that aired at the time. And one of the fascinating, funny things, Christopher Reeve, I don't know what you know about him as a person, but, he grew up in serious money, right? I mean, like, he was from, like, sort of the landed aristocracy of New England, to the degree that the United States has such things. He really grew up in old money. And when you see him interviewed in that thing, boy, does it come across like, I mean, he's got the ascot on and talking about how he's really, but he's not wrong that, like, in Superman 1 and 2, he's really trying to differentiate Clark from Superman on that psychological level. Like, I'm going to play Clark as the total loser buffoon with the hunched over shoulder, and then, like, it's not that I look so much dramatically different from Superman. It's that I, psychologically, Lois could never imagine that this idiot could be Superman.
Yeah.
In Superman 3, he drops all that, and he talks about that in the thing. Like, if you watch, Clark is pretty competent, and is sort of presenting as, like, the solid family man, like the thing that she's looking for because she's a single mom.
Yeah.
And he's doing a good job of that in that film. So that's all good. So then why doesn't it work? Because it doesn't. is sort of the question in my mind. And I think that, it starts with that skiing sequence and then it just gets silly. And as much as I appreciate the silliness of like the 1983 graphics that Atari supplied, where they're hidden in the fortress with the computer and he's shooting at Superman on a video.
I can live with that. It's a push, but I can live with that.
Yeah,
I think it's a good point. Sorry, I didn't want to jump over.
No, please.
So where I see this film, and I think you've made some really good points. If you were to get rid of all of the filler shit that has nothing to do with the franchise and actually detracts from it, if you were to get rid of, I'll even give you the opening 45 minutes, the shtick in that opening 45 minutes. I have no problem with the shtick, but it's from there. There's so many unnecessary scenes and jokes and filler bits in there. If you remove all of that stuff and just sort of focus on the nuts and bolts, I think there's a salvageable film in there, because there's Richard Pryor being the sole center point for the shtick. Yeah, fine, no worries. You do that in Superman 1 with Otis and with Lex Luthor. But the film on its own, I think what makes it so frustrating is and maybe this is how I'm quantifying it. I want to so badly like this film because the pieces are in place, and it makes me more emotive when it's as bad as it is. Because I see it's almost like watching a really good team lose every game. You spent a lot of money, you got the best players, you put them in place, and then they just go out and just lose.
Yeah, you're right. It's like
they have these innings where they play really well, but they just generally throw everything away, and it's just like, ugh.
That's a really good analogy. The one thing I can recall, if I were trying to say like why does this movie not work? And there is something about it. And I have to say, as much as I, as a kid, liked the evil Superman sequences, but there's enough silliness in them. And it's not, he's like evil in a petty way at times, like you're saying, he's like flying off for a BJ, and it's like,
I don't mind that.
But see, I look at it and like, we used to have the Leonard Maltin movie guide in the house as a kid, and he detested Superman 3. He gave Superman 4 a better rating. And his guide talked about how Superman 3 was mean-spirited. And there is something nasty. There is kind of a nastiness to that film. And it really, I think, does come from that evil Superman versus good Superman sequence that is not, I don't know. There's just something about it that it's just a little off-putting. And it might be the jokiness with which it's handled, rather than, because if you treated that theme seriously and gave it some gravitas, he could be mean, but it could you could feel like, oh, that's a serious thing that he's mean. Instead, the meanness becomes a source for some of the comedy, like the
way that it transitioned in, like the Lana Lang scene where he is trying to, put the moves on her, and there's a bridge, and he's like, I thought that was actually really well done, that scene.
Yeah, that scene is well done. I agree.
I think that's good. So I think we look at this film as one that's got potential, but and again, going back to, and I want to get Integrity's comments in, but going back to where was it? I think this quantifies it. Superman 3 had the budget but had no heart, and I think that's it's just, as somebody who, I wouldn't call myself a Superman fan, but I call somebody who grew up loving Superman as a kid, and it's disappointing. Just to add on the other comments. Just following on from what we were talking about with time travel, I think, and with the Avengers, Integrity said, I don't know if you could do it much better in the 70s. Remember, all the budget is spent on making audiences believe a man can fly, hence flying time travel. And then he says, oh, crap, my bad. As I think he's saying, Back to the Future, of course, that's a good time travel film.
Yeah.
And then from his view, or her view, I think it's his, Lana Lang and Evil Superman are good scenes. Everything else is a drag. Which is a good segue into Superman 4, which, you know what?
Well, do you want to do a rating of Superman 3 to close out Superman 3?
Should we? Yeah, let's do that. And then when we do the rating of Superman 4, we can then talk about, or do we want to save the rating for the last 15 minutes where we compare the two, which one's the best?
All right. You have a point there. Let's save the rating.
Then we know that, when we score, we want to do a quick chat on the comparison. With Superman 4, and I think the budget thing is there. I really liked the Smallville return piece. I liked that in that film, Clark Kent was even more self-assured, and even as Superman, he was a bit more comfortable in his skin and was starting to know his path. I liked that. The thing that was weird about that film, and it's just weird, was
you broke up for me quite a bit there. But
are we there? Because I think you're frozen on my screen. I don't know who's. Oh, you're back. I'm back. Are we okay?
Okay, yeah, it looks better now. Thank you. Sorry.
Are we still live?
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Oh,
Okay.
are we? Yeah, we are. Okay.
Yeah. Back to the Future is awesome. Yes, it is integrity. That was our first ever show. Was Back to the Future.
Oh yeah.
All we didn't put many out, but I think the one thing I found that was a bit sort of weird throughout the whole thing, and it's not a problem, but the thing I found that was weird was the whole political insertion of Superman and his willingness to go ahead and take care of man by getting rid of their nuclear weapons. And it was I just found it to be a weird element in the film. And I don't know.
Well, this was Christopher Reeve's pet project, right?
Was it really? No, I did
not. It was, yes.
So,
Christopher Reeve, this was his big political thing. He was willing to do Superman 4 if he could have the story. He could write the story or be involved in the creation of the story. And this was what he wanted to tell, the story he wanted to tell. And he also had a pet, which I actually tried to look into streaming. I have not been able to do it. The other condition he had for Canon Films to get them to come and do it, to get him to come and do Superman 4 was that they fund his other pet project, which was his other movie, where I'm not exactly sure the entire plot. It looks pretty awful, but I want to apparently it did, the critics said it was pretty okay, but it didn't do well in the theater. It looks like it's probably a bit much, but anyway, he had all these special conditions. I mean, listen, first of all, I don't think you can talk about Superman 4 without setting the stage a little bit. I want to say, first of all, I have a personal project that someday I want to accomplish in mind. Superman 4, unlike the first three, was, the Salkinds had their option to produce Superman films had expired, and it was purchased by this group Canon Films, which went out of business. I think Superman 4 was a major contributing factor to its bankruptcy, but it was already on its way. They when they started, they had set aside a $33 million budget for Superman 4, and right before the camera started rolling, they slashed it to $17 million, which explains a lot, and of course, $6 million of that $17 million had been spent on fulfilling Christopher Reeve's contract and his various, requirements. So you had $11 million left to do the rest of the film. And Canon Film, I'm interested in their entire oeuvre because they are like the 80s version of, my father was into this studio that produced a bunch of B pictures in the 60s, and they were called American International. I'm not exactly sure what happened to them, but they were like a B action movie. And I think I talked to you about this on one of our chats. They did Death Wish 4. They did Masters of the Universe, the 1987 He-Man film, which was another thing that. Yes, it's awful. But again, everything was done on the cheap, and so much of their stuff is when you watch it, it is dripping 80s cheese, which I therefore like. So Mannequin, if you've ever seen the movie Mannequin, which is actually pretty good, but it's very 1980. It's set in Philadelphia, which is another reason to watch it for those of us who are from Philly. It's very 1985 or whatever, and so Superman 4 is produced by that studio. It's done under a completely different set of conditions from the previous three, and it had this. One of those conditions was that Christopher Reeve said, we're going to make it about nuclear weapons, and I'm going to have a lot of story control. And he ran around like the second director on this set, being this was going to be his magnum opus. And even by the end, he realized what a disaster the film actually was in its realization. But I agree, nevertheless, with integrity that that Superman 4 feels more like a Superman movie in the vein of Superman 1 and 2 than 3 does. There is more attempt at what Richard Donner had set forth as the game plan in Superman 4. And I always thought, and Richard, like Leonard Maltin, that guy, I said, and I do too. I like Superman 4 better than Superman 3 at the end of the day, even though it is a cheaper film. And I see he has a comment here.
Yeah, there's a few here. I'll go down I'll just go down just to make sure we're getting them all in, because I want, right now, whilst we can get everyone's comments in. So he downloads Superman Redeemed, fan edit by a digitalman.
Fan edit of what?
You'll find, sorry?
Oh, I see. I was wondering what it's a fan edit of. It's the best parts of 3 and 4. Oh, yeah. Really?
Yeah, so and that's something I think he saw in the comment. Back to the Future is an awesome film, which we said. And then he said Christopher Reeve has a story credit. He's also signed off on the director. The other movie was Street Smart. It's a good film. And then he said, which in context of what you're saying, half of the Superman 4 budget went to Masters of the Universe.
Yes. And then the Masters of the Universe, they had a sequel planned, but that movie didn't do well and they couldn't get the licensing rights back from Mattel. So they made a movie called Cyborg with all of the costumes and sets that they had basically budgeted and earmarked for Masters of the Universe 2, but that they could not afford to make. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of studio they were. They're like, well, we have all this crap, so we're going to sort of make another movie with what we have. They were also talking about taking a Superman 5 because Superman 4 is 90 minutes long. It feels longer, but it's 90 minutes long, which makes it substantially shorter than 1, 2, and 3. But there is like 40 minutes of outstanding deleted footage, which I don't know, Sean, if you've seen, but I certainly have. Like,
I read about this because the film is really short.
Yes. And they were going at one point to try to make a Superman 5 out of the stuff that had been excised. That's they're like, your classic like discount studio. Like, we have some footage over here, we have some footage over there. We'll stitch it together. We'll make a movie. We'll throw it out there. I like that kind of thing, just on a because I think it forces when you're doing stuff on that kind of a shoestring budget. I mean, a lot of it's going to be junk, but it also forces you into making creative types of decisions and decisions that a person with budget would not make. And it creates for like unusual things. Superman 4 is an unusual thing when you watch it,
Yeah. And I think with Superman 4, it does really come across. And I didn't know what I don't know. And I think when we talk about the budget and when I read the reviews, to me, it looked really cheap. Some of the effects, some of the flying effects, and I didn't know. I just in my mind, I was like, "Is this of the period, or is this lower quality than previous?" And when you start reading the reviews of Superman 4, it does get slated for really cheap special effects. And
but that doesn't bother me.
It didn't bother me because I think the spirit of the film was kind of going back where Superman was presented in a creative way via Lex Luthor. An overwhelming adversary, and for me that was very much in the spirit of what we want Superman to be, and that's why I think I only had 5 notes, because the only things that were problematic were down to what seemed to be budgetary considerations, or there were certain things that weren't explained. I think the worst part of the film was the whole the love scene thing between him and the new editor, and the whole
I love the double date sequence. I think that's one of the really clever things that they did.
I don't have a problem with that scene. I thought that was fine. What I had
best line in that movie: "Nice dress, neat dress, neat dress." It's not even nice, neat dress. It gets me every time, and that's a real laugh.
Then Superman comes in, and of course, it shows the level
of that very lovely outfit you're wearing.
And I did like that element. I'll explain what I didn't like, but what I liked about that was it shows how evolved Superman is taking this persona of Clark Kent versus Superman, even down to that little nuance. But this was an issue I think that was a lot of Donner fans had with the second Superman, which was the forget me kiss. And this kind of comes back when the whole sequence where he throws Lois off the building, takes her for a flight. It turns out that she actually kind of remembered, and it seems she's been keeping it on the down low because she respects Superman and respects Clark. And then it never worked.
Well, but it seems like in Superman 4, they do a really strange thing during the sequence when he reveals himself to her, and then he says, "You don't even know my real name," and she says, "Get Kal-El." And he says, "Oh, you remember?" She says, "I remember everything." Well, all of a sudden, it's like he can kiss her in and kiss her out. Like, in other words, all of those memories are still somewhere in Lois's subconscious. And if he feels like calling them up, like a puppet master, he can bring them up, and then he can kiss her back to where she doesn't remember anything. It's like a hypnosis sequence.
So is that why she remembered? Because when I watched it, I was sitting there confused because I didn't know if he kissed her and that brought her memory back, or I didn't know if she was just, my initial impression was she remembered, but she was being a bit more, it was just in her memory banks, but it was something.
Well, I mean, Superman, this is actually John Cryer, who is, Lenny the nephew there.
That's
And
right.
of course, they're from Back to the Future. Actually, probably said the best thing about Superman 4 that, he was saying, like, listen, they, unfortunately, at the end of the day, what happened was they released an unfinished film that they ran out of money.
It did seem that way. And actually, just
Right.
to add on, Integrity said Cannon screwed Chris Reeve. He would have never made the film if he knew they'd slash the budget 45 minutes or deleted.
Right.
And then he
Right.
said Superman 4 could easily be re-released as a greatly improved film. Check a Price Production YouTube channel for upgraded scenes. All special effects in Superman 4 can be fixed for pennies and on the dollar nowadays. Fans have already begun, which would be really cool. I think
Sure.
Superman 4 could be made into a probably the best Superman film next to Superman 1. I think
Really?
there is the
Wow.
capacity there, and there's room in the script to remake it and remake it better with the
Yeah. I see where you found the politics awkward. I actually kind of liked it because there you go. There's an example of what Superman learns in Superman 4 is that one of the limits of his powers, and that's what you really need Superman to have, are limits. And it's hard with a character like him to give him limits. But what he discovers is that basically, yes, he could rid the world of nuclear weapons, but he probably shouldn't. That it's not up to him. He, as much as it might pain him, it's like the parent watching the child who, I could walk over there and, color that picture for you and stay inside the lines, but you're not going to learn anything if I do that. It's that kind of thing.
But did he come to that conclusion?
I think so. At the end of the film, that's what he says, right? I mean, basically, it's a paraphrase of, I'm trying to remember, it's a paraphrase of Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower said, the world peace will happen when the people of the world, want it so badly that they demand it from their governments or something to that effect. And that's exactly what he says, more or less. Going back for a second to the point I was, we were talking about Superman, like the lowest in and out. One of the interesting things, and by the way, I should say, in reference to our discussion of Superman 3, I might be the only person on earth who likes Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man being the one exception to my basic Marvel disinterest. I do like Spider-Man. Of course, Spider-Man is a riff on Superman, character-wise to begin with. And the films, the Spider-Man films, especially Spider-Man 3, I think is a well-executed Superman 3. Whereas other people didn't seem to like I know it has the multiplication of villains problem, but basically I found Spider-Man 3 to be a very enjoyable film that explores the exact same theme. He gets the black costume and then has to sort of battle the evil version of himself in some way, in Venom and then himself. So Spider-Man and Superman 4 has a theme that I think that the Spider-Man franchise certainly explores, which that they do kinda with Lois when she comes and gives Clark Kent the cape that was lost by Superman, which if you think about it, this is at his point where she should not be remembering who's Clark Kent is Superman. But the implication is obviously that she does recognize that there is some obvious connection between Clark and Superman, more than one that she has, because you'd think that Lois would think, oh, I'm Lois Lane. If I keep the cape, Superman will come find me and I'll give him the cape.
Yeah.
No, she brings it to Clark Kent. And the dialogue in that sequence sort of tends to suggest that, she says things like, well, if you do see Superman, I think I just want him to know. And it's like this winking at the camera thing. Well, if you watch the Spider-Man films, Aunt May, the actress who does that, they do a lot of that with, I think it's in Spider-Man 2, where she has this sort of like winking at the camera, knowing dialogue with Peter Parker saying, well, if I could say something to Spider-Man, it would be blah, blah. And of course, he's trying to keep the secret from Aunt May. But, so in other words, like there are elements of Superman 4 and Superman 3 that were taken, I think, very knowingly by those films, by Sam Raimi, who directed those Spider-Man films. And it says that there are worthwhile ideas in them. And Superman 4, the chief worthwhile idea is that, Superman discovers that while he has the ability to do something, he really shouldn't. And that's a limitation to his power that he has to internalize.
It's you mentioning that with Superman, and I haven't seen the Spider-Man films.
Integrity agrees with me. Spider-Man 3 is greatly overhated. Completely agree.
Yes, overhated, not overrated. Overhated.
Overhated. No, it's a good term. I never heard that before. I like it.
I've only seen the first Spider-Man, but the point that you've raised, and it's something that I think I kind of picked up on, but I didn't realize I picked up on, was the returning of the cape, and it does, lend to this theme that Lois, you know, her character is quite a switched on, smart, you know, tough reporter. And, you know, Superman spending that much time with Clark Kent, you know, obviously she's going to figure it out time and time again. And, you know, I think she's smart enough to realize that this facade has to remain. You know,
Yeah.
you know, if I report on this, if I make a thing of this, my reality with Clark, with Superman, is not going to exist. And the benefit, you know, the benefits far outweigh, you know, keeping this sort of, even if it's something that she subconsciously knows. I think there's an element of this. I like that sort of understated way of delivering that. And I think that's really well done.
No, I think it is. The only thing about it is that, like, I think this is going back to the John Cryer comment, that it feels like disjointed, because at times she doesn't seem to have any idea that one is the other. Yeah. And then you're right. They kind of introduce, I like the way you put that. They introduce the notion that perhaps she knows, but is maintaining the fiction, not just, you know, because it would destroy the Superman thing, that as a reporter, actually, that's all really good, you know, but it doesn't feel quite completed as a thought process in the film, if that makes sense. But maybe that's just because it's being understated, and probably that theme is better left understated than, you know, them hammering you over the head with it, which, you know, really Richard Donner, if you're going to have a critique of Richard Donner, that's maybe one thing that he does in the first Superman, is kind of beat the, hey, guess what? He's Jesus thing to death. You know what I mean? Like,
I think when we look at Superman 4, the thing that I really try to square is, when we take a look, we agree that this is a film full of heart, and you know, there's a lot more Superman in it.
Yes.
What I can't square is there's elements of it that seem, and I don't know if it's budget, seem really lazy in the scripting and the way they've progressed things. And I don't know if that's a product of not having the money to budget the effects to deliver the outcomes, or if just the writing in general was just very much, we're just going to get something on paper, get it out, and just fire it out there. Because a lot of it just seems sort of like, you know, like, this happens, he wins, game over. And that was the thing, I think, that I found not almost boring in a way. It was very predictable. You know, I liked the film because I felt like I'm watching a Superman again. But at the same time, I was left kind of going, yeah, fine. Good.
No,
I don't hate it.
Suffers from, like, repetition. Like, it does feel like and I think that the one that stuck out like a sore thumb to me was the completely unnecessary, you could argue, sequence where he's feeling sad, so he wants to talk to Lois and reveal his secret. So we do that whole bit again. Yeah. But it doesn't feel organic to the story at all. It just feels thrown in, like, and again, like, we're checking boxes, like, well, we have to have this sequence and we have to play the love theme. And so we're going to do it. But it feels very, I think even some of the shots, I think one shot of the train, every time I look at it, I'm pretty sure that is a reused shot from the original Superman film.
It may very well be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they reused it. That's how repetitive it is. And I know that they were cutting budget, but it also, you can do something on a cheap budget without being that overtly repetitive.
Yeah. So Integrity said Lacey Warfield has an arc in the real Superman 4 film. She volunteers to help Supes and Nuclear Man. Because of this, Superman gives her a card to his real estate agent in Smallville, so she gets the Kent farm.
That is correct. Now, the only thing, I don't know if you noticed in watching Superman 4, if you watch carefully, pick up on that. If you watch, and again, this is where I should have, gotten you access to the deleted scenes, because they do help, in trying to see what the film sort of might have been. I mean, on the one hand, I think one of the elements that did not make it to the theatrical cut that I think is just as well is that the Nuclear Man that you see in the film was the second Nuclear Man. There was a first attempt, and the first attempt is like a Richard Lester thing. It's played almost purely for laughs. Like he's supposed to be have been born with a peanut in his head, to use a South Park image. So he's dumb, and Superman defeats him very easily outside of a nightclub, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But in the theatrical cut and the sequence he's talking about, there's a point where Nuclear Man is looking at a picture of Lacey Warfield on the cover of the newspaper, and you gather from that he loves her or wants to be with her. Yeah. And so he flies out of where he is, which is supposed to be the top of the Empire State Building, which another ridiculous thing about this movie, Lex Luthor is escaped convict, and he somehow is occupying the top of the Empire, the Metropolis State Building.
One of my notes.
Nevertheless, the nuclear man flies out of the top of the Metropolis State Building, and you get the idea that he's flying to the Daily Planet to go find Lacey Warfield, and Superman comes out to say, oh, well, I'm not going to tell you where she is. And then they have a fight on the street, and he says, no, don't do it to people. And then he says, all right, fine, you win. I'll take you to her. And then they go up, and they are back in the Metropolis. Like, he flew from the Metropolis Empire State Building, the Empire State Building, and arrived at the Metropolis, because when they fly up at the top, they're in that building again, because that's a continuity error from the.
I picked up on that when I watched this, and I think for future reference, when we do these, I kind of like this separated piece where we have two films that we review separately and then bring them together.
Yeah, this is.
And I like the idea of releasing this over time, because I think one of the things that hurt me with watching Superman 4 is I watched it the day after Superman 3, and I think I felt like I just done a biathlon, and I'm not a strong swimmer, and I just finished like the hardest part, and I'm just trying to get through the bit that I like, which is riding the bike, and I think I missed some things in Superman 4 because I was so fatigued from Superman 3.
That's another good term for Superman 3. It's fatiguing.
Nuclear Man 1 was terrible. I don't know what they were thinking there.
Yeah, it really is awful. I mean, listen, the one thing that I noticed in watching Superman 4 this time, and I think to answer Integrity's question or point, he doesn't know what they were thinking. What I noticed about even the film that we got, the Superman 4 that was released, it's noticeably more geared towards a under 12 audience than the previous films. So, for example, even taking I had to remind myself that when Lenny shows up to break Lex Luthor out of the work crew prison, and he traps the police officers in the car and then sends the car over to gang.
I noted this one.
Yeah, and then they turn up like it's a Dukes of Hazzard episode. They're like, ooh, right? Like they are not killed by the car being flown into the canyon or into the quarry, and they show up like uninjured with goofy looks on their face. But that is because and there are other elements that were. I mean, the one that really sticks out like a sore thumb to me is that, and maybe it's. Superman at the end summarizing for Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor asked him, well, how did you know that you could defeat Nuclear Man by taking away his access to the sun? And he says, simple high school physics, Lex. I knew that if he was created in the sun, he must have also, his energy must come from the sun. What? That is not what. That has nothing to do with anything.
I get that was at that point I was like, I'm gonna give that a pass, that's fine. You mentioned that I actually thought the film was, I got really excited about the film when I thought in the nicest possible way that John Cryer had murdered two of the prison guards. I thought this is getting tasty, because I kind of like that, almost like a Tim Burton darkness, and I kind of thought it was very Tim Burton-esque, the car that he had with the speakers coming, it was very sort of gothic-y looking, and I thought, this is going to be a little artistic and a little bit different. And when you see them, like, they're dead, they are dead. He just flew this car into gone, and then when they pop their head up, I'm like, oh, I was a bit worried at that point. I was a little bit worried.
Yeah. Well, go on.
I think what we need, because I think with Superman 4, the thing that, and I'm glad we spent more time on Superman 3 because there's way more talking points. I think with Superman 4, I think we need to look at it as what it is. And I think we're at the point where we need to really compare these Superman 3 and Superman 4 and really come to a consensus. Well, we may or may not. I think we will. I think every Superman fan on the planet will come to a consensus on this. But where do you see 3 versus 4? How are you reviewing 3 and how are you reviewing 4? Who wins between the battle of the bad?
Oh, well, this is where, of course, I depart from IMDb, which has Superman 3. What does it rank Superman 3 at? I know Superman 4
as well. Give him it was like something like an 11% to 40% or something.
Yeah, I mean, Superman 3 is considered like not good, but like not a disaster, whereas Superman 4 is like a disaster. See, I think and this is the thing, general audiences focus on special effects, and that's your number one complaint about Superman 4. I don't give a damn about the special effects. I mean, yes, they're cheap, but like you can make a good movie where you you just ask the audience, listen, audience, we don't have the budget for real special effects, so we're either going to do workarounds or we're going to have to ask for your suspension of disbelief. But pay attention, setting aside the cheesy special effects, pay attention to the script, the other elements that are going on. Now, Superman 4 is not a piece of cinematic artwork. I don't mean that, but I think, as Integrity said at the outset of this, and I agree completely, and like I said, he said it more succinctly than I probably could, or am going to, or am doing now. It has more heart. It is a Superman movie,
yes,
in a way that Superman 3 is not, and so therefore I like Superman 4 better than I like Superman 3. I will acknowledge, however, that Superman 3, from a technical standpoint, is a more complete film. Like, it hangs together start to finish. And if I were to view Superman 3 not as a Superman film, but rather as like sort of a Richard Pryor comedy film that has Superman in it for the parody of it, I would actually, even on that level, I can kind of appreciate Superman 3. Yeah. So I like both the films in the end. Again, when I say like, I don't mean that there's a difference between like and saying they're good. I like them. They appeal to me, and obviously a childhood nostalgia is part of that. But if I had to give them a numerical rating, I would probably put Superman 4 at like a 5 out of 10. Good idea, short on execution. And Superman 3 at more like a 4 out of 10. Yeah. Not such a hot idea, but execution wise, there's less to fold.
I think I was going to give them the same score, and I think the 5 that I would give is a generous 5, because I really like for me, I think that was a really good way to describe it. Superman 4 is not incredible by any stretch, but it's a Superman film. Whereas Superman 3 is some sort of, bastardization of the franchise in a way that has a lot of good stuff in it. And I think I keep coming back to the Superman versus Clark Kent scene. That is such a good scene. It's such a good element in that film.
Right.
That it's a bit of it actually hurts the film more that it's not able to carry a better score given those
yeah, it pieces. Didn't build itself around that piece well. Yeah.
And I the way I'm going to compare these two is I agree. And also Integrity, I think we're all on the same page here. Superman 4 wins in a landslide. I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to view this. I'm going to give a bit of an analogy here. Superman 3 is like the Dallas Cowboys. Shit ton of money, and I fucking hate it. But Superman 4 is like the Cleveland Browns. They lose all the time. They have no money, but I'm really rooting for them. And that's kind of like what how
a plucky little movie that could.
Yeah, and
well, that's how I feel about Canon Studios in general. That's why at some point my project is to watch every movie ever made. It's like 110, and I want to watch every one of them.
You can make the most niche new YouTube channel on the planet.
You're right. Going through the Canon film review, But you know what we should do as a postscript to this, and I should have mentioned this before this, but I will lend to you if you can't get access to it. Otherwise, I purchased it, and you can watch it online. The real postscript to the Superman saga, before you get to Superman Returns. Someday we should do Superman Returns, because that would be a very worthwhile discussion to have.
Yeah.
Because that's a great one. Is that movie good or bad? And that one I could go either way on. There are parts of it I really like, and I have difficulty at times deciding who I think, to the degree that it doesn't work, whose fault it is.
Yeah.
But having said that, there is this documentary that was produced, who unfortunately passed away at a very young age. I mean, he's like late 40s, so that's creeping up on us, so it makes me scared. But you may be aware that there was an attempt before Superman Returns in the mid-90s, after the success of Batman and Batman Returns, and Tim Burton was so hot, to revive the Superman franchise with Tim Burton. And they were working on the production of a film called Superman Lives, and it was to follow, to some degree, the comic book story from the early 90s, where Superman died in the comic books and then was brought back. And it was going to star, and this is the part you'll like, as the Man of Steel, because this was already after Christopher Reeve had his accident and was not any longer someone who could be brought back. It was going to star Nicolas Cage as Superman, and they went so far.
Ooh.
The famous thing about it is there is a photo of him. They did
I think I've seen this.
They did some, what do you call those? Like studies or, like test shots of him in the costume photographs, and it got released, and it was met with universal derision, and as a result, the production fell apart. But it's probably one of the most famous movies that was never made. And there's a documentary I have about it. You'd be interested to check it out.
I would be curious to see that. Yeah. And Integrity, thanks for sticking with us, by the way. I'd agree with that, but I think Superman 4 moves up to a respectable 6 out of 10 if they restore most deleted scenes and spend $20 upgrading special effects. And then the other thing is, and what I'll do, Integrity, is I'll put this in the description when we're done. I can't stress enough. I can't stress to
I will do this. Thank you, Integrity, what you're about to read.
Yeah. To Christopher Reeve super fans enough to watch Superman Redeemed by A Digital Man. There's really no point in watching Superman 3 or Superman 4. Now, I take it that's a YouTube channel. If you do want to put in the comments if there is a link to direct me, I'll try to find it otherwise. I'm sure I can Google it. I'm not that much of an idiot, but we will find it. We'll put it in the description for anybody watching this so you can be directed to that, because I'm going to have a look at it as well. I think it's definitely worth a watch after sitting through the last.
Oh my goodness, I'm very excited. Look at this. It's got like a little DVD menu deal going on. Oh my.
Let me Google it myself. Let me Google it, because I'm now missing the boat here.
Well, this is just the YouTube of the DVD menu. So apparently you can get this damn thing on disc.
Is it a YouTube channel?
Well, the name of the thing is Troy Anno Peru 1. But he's giving A Digital Man is the name of the. Oh, well, I'm definitely going to check this out. Can I say, as a postscript to Superman 4, by the way, a comment I wanted to get out there, but I didn't. Listen, I know that Margot Kidder had a tough life, but I don't know what was happening between 1980 and 1987. But good Lord, by 1987, by Superman 4, she looks rough. Like, I don't know. She looks like she's been spending a couple years living on heroin on the streets.
I thought that in Superman. So this, and not to be disrespectful, but in Superman 1, I thought she was a stretch as the love interest, because I thought she didn't look like she was cast correctly. Like Lana's character, I thought was more apt for Lois Lane, like who played Lana in 3. If she was in 1, because I felt like Lois Lane.
I disagree with you. I disagree. Oh, well, let me put it this way. One of the things that I have an built-in advantage here because of the DVD set that I have. You can watch the screen tests of the other people that they tried out as Lois Lane. Some of them more attractive in a traditional sense. None of them. Like when you watch them, you're like, oh yeah, Margot Kidder is Lois Lane. Because it's not about the look. It's about, do I buy that this person is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist?
I just think and this is more my thing. Like I didn't find her, I don't know. There was just something about the character as the actress. I didn't buy her as sort of that character. And maybe because I didn't, and this sounds bad, I just didn't find her as somebody who, I wanted her to look a bit less like she's been smoking like a chimney for the last 20 years. She looked like a chain smoker. And that was something. Whereas someone I don't know, like Sigourney Weaver or something, somebody, who could play a strong female character and be that Pulitzer Prize winning reporter. To be fair, I thought she looked better in 4 than she did in 1.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this may be a separate episode altogether.
Yeah, no. I don't know how you could possibly think that. I mean, she looked to me to be emaciated in Superman. I'm serious. Like, if you had told me they had found her Karen Allen style, working at a toll booth, and she'd been addicted to heroin, basically holding it together for the last, barely holding it together for the last 3 years. But and really, what was Margot Kidder in after Superman? Name another Margot Kidder film. Go ahead. Silent Night, Deadly Night. I know that one.
I need that. I don't know. You know what? It doesn't matter. So just for everyone, where we're kind of going with this, I think the direction we're going with the channel, because I started doing something today that I've really enjoyed, and I think the way we're going to go with this is sort of capes, crime, and the crazy. So we're going to be doing these reviews regularly, and I think I really am enjoying this sort of return to superhero films, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that we can litigate through these films. We're also going to be doing so I think we're going to continue with this style where we do these reviews and release them in 3-parters, 2 to 3-parters over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, and do a live. Andrew and I'll be going live more often, doing more crime stuff, so more of the true crime stuff, talking about that.
I love true crime, Sean. I will try to join you in this endeavor.
I think it dovetails really well with the superhero stuff too. I think you can have sort of like both on the same channel. So that's going to be more our live streams. And if there is anything that you want us to review, let us know. For anybody who's watching this, Integrity, thank you for joining in today. Really appreciate your time. I think we're not going to do Superman every single one. So we're going to find another film to review over the course in 3 weeks time. I'm going to be going on vacation. If the link doesn't work, I just found it on Reddit. I'm going to check Reddit after this, and I will find it and share it in the link. As far as where you can find it. But to everybody, thanks for joining in. Andrew, thank you so much. And we will catch up with everybody soon. To anybody watching this, we will be releasing this in 3 parts over the course of the next 3 weeks, and then I'll be back from vacation. Again, thank you so much, everybody. Have a good week.